Hi, everybody. Great to see you all. Welcome to our social permaculture pop up moment here. I'm Starhawk,
Hello, and I'm Charles.
and we have our two wonderful interpreters who you'll be seeing with today, um, Sarah Comerford and Moonbeam Mage. I want to just say thank you to our whole EAT team for helping us put this all together. We're going to get started. Um, And just to say, we were thinking about this, really thinking about this moment when we're sort of coming out of COVID. On the other hand, I don't know about you, but where I am, a lot of people are still getting COVID. And it's uh, it's kind of a crazy moment. We'll go more into that, but I want to begin just by acknowledging the traditional peoples of the land that I'm on right here. I'm in Yelamu, sometimes called San Francisco, which is the land of the Ramaytush Ohlone. It's a land which has a very powerful history, people who have tended the land for tens of thousands of years of colonization by the Spanish. This is one of the places where one of the original missions were built, later by the Californians, the Americans. Um, it's also a land that has benefited from the labor of many stolen peoples, or peoples who were brought here and pretty heavily exploited, starting with the original Ramaytush Ohlone, um, and the other Indians who were collected into the missions, the Chinese who built the railroads, um, the women who were part of the sort of Wild West and the gold rush and all of that sort of romanticized, whore with the heart of gold in the saloons, the African Americans who were enslaved, all of those people. Just to acknowledge that what we have here today has been built on a lot of pain, but also a lot of incredible creativity and resilience. And it's my hope that the work that we do can help create a culture of healing and a culture where everybody can be seen and be valued for the full richness of who they are. So we're going to do a little grounding, um, which is how we always start everything, by connecting our energy to the earth. So take a moment, settle yourself. I can definitely use a moment to settle myself because I was driving until just a few moments ago, caught in the traffic getting back here, but here I am. And taking a deep breath in and out and just let all the stress of the day kind of drain away. You can imagine yourself like a tree or a bush that's rooted in the earth, and any tension, anything you're feeling that's keeping you from being fully present, just let it go down into the earth. And imagine those roots pushing down through the soil, down through all the layers of rock and bedrock, down into that heart of fire at the core of the earth. And again, any of that tension, any of that stress, just let it go. Let that fire take it and turn it back into pure energy. You can let it go with a big sound like whoosh. Maybe one more time. And now taking a deep breath, bring some of that energy up through your feet and legs, up from all those layers of the earth into your body. Up into the base of your spine and your belly. Feel your spine growing and stretching up like a tree trunk. Breathe it up and out the top of your head like branches. Feel them reach up to the sky and sweep back down and touch the earth. And taking a breath, just feel that circuit of energy coming up and through you and around and back to the earth. And now feel the sky energy. Maybe where you are, it's moonlight or starlight. Here, there's still some sunlight, although it's cloudy and rainy, which is always a blessing, right? But just take a breath and draw it in. Take it in. If it's rainy, let the rain kind of wash some of the dust off those leaves. If it's sunny, draw in that sunlight, just like a tree feeds on sunlight. If it's moonlight, draw in that moonlight, that magic. Breathe it in, fill yourself with it. Feel yourself surrounded by kind of like an egg-like form of those leaves and branches that make a nice filter. Filter out anything you don't want, allow in anything you do. And blessed be. Charles, you up for casting a circle, calling in the elements?
Sure. Let's call in the elements tonight. I invite you all to join us. I'm going to remove these spotlights if I can do it. Just invite you all to look around your space, feel around your space. Notice what's there. There's a deep breath. Notice if there's anything that represents air for you. This is often what we think of as east, the air. Sometimes people think of things of the mind or communication, breathing, breath, exchange, light. Notice what you see that's air. Just give a little gratitude in the direction for air in our world and all those airy things. And glance around your space and see if you see anything that's related to creativity, action, excitement, energy. What do you see that's related to fire? And let's give a little gratitude for the fire in our lives.
Okay.
And water. So anything in your space, anything here? Emotions, air, love. Let's give a little gratitude. All those watery things. And to earth, tangible, solid, corporeal earth. Little thank you, gratitude to earth. And spirit, that place where it comes together, we call it center sometimes. Where do you see spirit? Where do you see connection? The melding of the elements. Instead of say welcome to spirit. Just welcome elements. Welcome spirit. So just want to welcome us all here. Just take a moment and allow yourself to come here. Look at who's on the screen with us. It's part of the inspiration of our time was thinking about coming out of COVID. Though it is not gone, but things really seem to be shifting or coming back in. But we're still in this digital world, and just want to give a moment. Just take a look at who's here with us. I know there's probably people who aren't even in our little squares that'll be watching later on. Just a little gratitude for the community that we've been able to make across the digital realm as we move into this more physical, engaged space. So welcome, everybody. Welcome here tonight. You're muted, Star.
Isn't that the phrase of the last couple of years, right? You're muted.
Really is.
Yeah. Yeah, we call this a social permaculture pop-up, and I wanted to say a couple words about social permaculture. Permaculture is a design system that works with nature to look at land and culture and the principles of how nature works to help us meet our human needs while actually healing and regenerating the environment around us. And when permaculture started, it was started by, as a term by a couple of Australians, Bill Mollison and David Holmgren. They drew on a lot of knowledge and practices that people have been doing for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years, both indigenous and traditional land management and farming techniques, and also on science and systems theory, and put it together in a kind of unique way. But they started with 3 core ethics, and those are care for the earth, care for the people, care for, I like to say care for the future. You could say reduce consumption. You could say put the surplus back into the system. Sometimes people call that third one fair share. But they were environmental scientists. They taught at the university. They were interested in land and farming and agriculture. So really, permaculture focused a lot on the care for the land. And as it developed into really a whole global movement, and especially I will have to say as more women got into it, care for the people became also very important. Also, what a lot of people recognized was that it was the people in the permaculture systems that were actually generally the constraining factor. It's relatively easy to deal with the vegetables or even with the terrain or the water, but it's always a challenge to deal with people because people are the way people are. So some of us started to look at social permaculture. Is there a way we can apply some of the same understandings of how nature works to how human nature works? And there's a permaculture designer, Patrick Whitefield, who called permaculture the art of designing beneficial relationships. And I've often thought about that. Is there a way we can design more beneficial human relationships? We certainly live in a world right now where people, I think, have inadvertently come up with designs and systems and algorithms that seem to bring out the worst in human nature. Could we reverse that? Could we bring out the best in human nature? And so if we think about that and we think about what's happening with COVID, COVID is very interesting, almost a social experiment. Like, what would happen if we suddenly isolated people for a couple of years, far more than people have been isolated before, and shifted so much more of our social interactions to online, and removed, you know, just so many of the things that people had done and had depended on. Like when I think about in my world, things like in-person permaculture courses, witch camps, gatherings. Um, you know, I remember at one point talking with a friend of my brother's who's a musician, who was also an organizer of festivals when we were trying to decide whether we had to cancel our course because of COVID, and how he had decided to cancel their festival. And I just thought, God, so many of the things that people have done that have enriched their lives and brought them pleasure, suddenly we're deprived of them. At the same time, I know I found myself having actually more time to be in nature, more time to not be traveling and running around, to sit still, to connect into the land, to have time to think, to focus on my spiritual practice. So there are also some gifts in it. And we wanted to start by talking a little bit about both some of the challenges and some of the gifts. I've also noticed that now when we do get to meet in person, on the one hand, it's like I just feel so grateful and so happy. It almost doesn't matter what people are doing, just being around them. I was at a gathering this weekend. It was just so blissful to actually see people in person. And on the other hand, I mean, I've always been a kissy, huggy, you know, touchy kind of person. And now, like, oftentimes when people come up and want to hug you, part of me is like, yes. And part of me is like, are you trying to kill me? I find myself avoiding things that I might once have gone into. So we're going to do a little breakout and give you a chance to introduce yourself to another couple of people and share a little bit about what's been going on for you around COVID and around this strange time of coming back out of it, while still kind of going back into it. You know, what have you noticed about yourself or about your interactions? And Charles is going to put you into small groups where you'll have a chance to talk with someone. If you are here and you need the ASL interpretation, don't accept the invitation. Just stay in the main group and we'll continue to have ASL interpretation and have conversation in the main group. If you don't want to talk to anyone, that's also fine. You don't have to accept the invitation. But if you do accept it, you might meet an interesting person. Right? You ready, Charles?
Yeah, and we're gonna have about 8 minutes for this first breakout. So remember to share the time around. There'll be 3 to 4 of you in a room, and enjoy. So we'll see you back in about 8 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good connection with everybody else. I think we're going to talk about just what are some things that people notice? What were some of the real benefits coming out of COVID? You know, what are some of the things that really you find as highlights coming out? And I just want to open it up. We'll have a short little discussion here. You don't have to recap everything you said in your group, but what are some of the things that came up that were really benefits coming out?
Well, I got to meet people all over the world because of all the Zooms that I never would have met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, it was kind of like the best of time and the worst of times all together. For us, at least, it was like very isolating. So it's nice to find places to connect again.
Yeah, it was really amazing. All the people they got to meet, and also the people that I hadn't seen in so long, that we ended up having a lot more time. Like, this whole digital realm of like, I got to see my family a lot more. And I got their friends I hadn't seen in years. And we ended up chatting more because there's this whole way in which people are used to it.
Well,
Yeah, we did at the beginning. I set up several like families chats, and then it seemed like people got tired of each other. And we kind of stopped doing that. But yeah, there were people I saw a lot of online that I don't usually see. And then there are people that I realize are people I consider close friends I really love that I haven't actually seen in like 3 years now.
yeah.
Anyone feel like in some way your social skills got a little rusty?
Yes, very much so.
Completely.
I didn't have a very active social life before this. So Zoom meetings have become my social life pretty much. And I like connecting with people all around the world as well.
Mine got more demanding.
Hmm.
Right? My hierarchy of what my needs are were more clear.
I love the international aspects of it, and easily connecting with vastly different cultures, and in most cases there seems to be an openness heart around that, cultural sharing, greater understanding.
I know the first year we realized we had to do our spiral dance ritual online. And so we used it as an opportunity to invite in people from all over the world who are part of reclaiming our spiritual network. And that was really wonderful. Like I remember watching the invocations of, that people had done in completely different parts of the world, and it just was really beautiful.
Totally beautiful.
Yeah.
We had such a good time. Thank you.
Yeah. By the second year, we realized, oh, this is more like making a film than it is like producing a ritual.
Oh, wow.
And by the third year, we were really grateful to do it in person again. But there are some aspects we haven't yet, I don't think, cracked the code of how to combine the best of online with the best of in person. We tried that, but the online stuff didn't really work that well. From where we were, you couldn't really see or hear it very well in person. It might have worked better for the recording. But I think there is a way we can maybe synthesize some of the best of both.
One of the things I found interesting was watching Zoom technology improve and work out its bugs and moving forward. And in terms of that, there are aspects of hybrid meetings and technology and multi-place cameras, because a lot of companies did not come, the office people did not come back, and some did and some didn't. So they would have like a Zoom room where there's a camera that can pull out seven different people at a boardroom, and each of those people have their own little screen as well as everybody at home. It's I'm finding it quite fascinating.
Yeah, but that leads to one of the challenges that I found in coming back. It's been easy in some ways to be home and to be like, oh, I'm in my own place. I can get my cup of tea, like I'm situated. It's easy. And I find it getting harder to be like, oh, I've got to go to another place and be with other people and like negotiate, like, oh, where's the chair? And like, oh, it's just a travel. So I found it really easy to be here. Even though it has a lot of isolating components, but there's a part of it I find inertia, where sometimes it's hard to like pull myself out of my space and like put myself into another place and be with other people and not have all of my own kind of control of my own space and all the things that I get to control my own space that I have to negotiate when I move to another space with a bunch of people. So I think it's interesting how technology has moved us into this place where it kind of holds holds me in place, which
I
is a
see a
challenge.
hand there from Mary and Mom in San Francisco.
Um, Mom's sitting down again, but I am part of a women's choir, a large choir that sing to the dying. It's called Threshold Choir. And the Zooming was in one way much more intimate, like singing solo and looking into each other's eyes kind of thing. Whereas usually we're in a big room with 50 chairs. And we couldn't harmonize, but some of us learned band camp and learned to put our own voices in harmony so we could sort of harmonize with ourselves anyway.
Wow.
Sounds nice.
Patricia, I see your hand. So.
One of sort of not a dissenting voice, but taking a slightly different tack. Right at the start of the pandemic, I bought a new place in a very rural part of Washington State, and it's a very conservative part of the countryside. And part of what has really thrown me here is how many people didn't seem to give a damn whether I lived or died. So they weren't going to wear a mask, even if they were contagious. They didn't believe in it. It's a hoax, all of that. And I'm a scientist, and I knew that if I went into the grocery store to get things and, people weren't masked, I could die. I'm in my mid-70s. And I have a friend who's housebound, and, she had to rely on people bringing her things and hope that they were clean, and safe when they brought her stuff. So I know that the Zoom kept me connected with people I already knew, but the pandemic separated me from the people that I was just becoming neighbors with, and the fear around that has been very sad to me. It's not what I would have liked to have experienced, but I'm still alive, and so is my friend, and so that's the downside of it.
Yeah. I definitely found some relationships really ruptured around those divisions and perceptions about whether people were willing to be flexible enough to actually exhibit care for other people. Sherry, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment you, Star and Charles. I went to the permaculture class that happened online, and it was 15 weeks, much longer than a 2-week on session. And I think I benefited greatly from the depth of that class because it was online. And we had a lot of exercises. I know I personally did a lot more research, etc., because it wasn't consolidated on an online class. The only thing that was very difficult for Charles to get through my thick head was measuring contours with an A-frame. Measuring my quilt with 2 pencils just did not cut it. Never did figure out that. But then shortly thereafter, I got to join them both in Canada as a TA for their class, and I finally learned how to do contours. But I think, Charles, I want to particularly thank you for all the gazillions of hours you spent teaching me how to do mapping and geomapping, which I wouldn't have had that benefit on the land. So for me, it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. Thank you.
Now, really, Sherry, I struggled so hard to figure out how do we teach people swales and contours. Like, this is at the very beginning of the pandemic when a lot of people weren't even going outside, and it's like, all right, you take your like bedclothes and imagine them as a mountain and make yourself a little tiny A-frame out of pencils and you can find the contours on your quilt.
I did do all that, but I didn't understand it at all. It just did not translate to Brandy's swales online or on the land.
Tahara, I see your hand is up. And then we'll probably should move on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits I found was it, because it lasted so long. I mean, initially there was all this like, all right, we'll have the pause and sort of try to figure it out, but it lasted long enough that I feel like it became a leveling playing field. It leveled the playing field a little bit, right? It's like I heard amazing poetry and spoken word from people with disabilities that usually wouldn't be in the same circle. You didn't know how tall or short or whatever. No, you could turn off the video and still have a voice. And so, and vulnerability started showing up more because we'd just been through so much and such a different thing together. So for that, I am grateful, and I live in New Jersey and New York, so it hit here first, and seeing all that support for the doctors, the people like essential workers, and just the full emotional spectrum and human experience of it was something that I am grateful for.
So we want to look a little bit at some of the permaculture principles. So I am going to share my screen with you. And start with the ethics. Again, care for the earth, care for people, and care for the future seems to have gotten out of place, but we'll come across it somewhere in here. And then in permaculture, we have principles. They're sort of guiding ideas that we use when we're thinking about how do you design a landscape. And Charles and I have thought a lot about what would the social permaculture principles be. And one of them for me is the idea that abundance springs from relationships. It's not about separate, isolated stuff. I'm one of those people that can happily go to bed with a rose catalog and drool over pictures for hours and hours and be like, I want that rose, right? But permaculture isn't really about having that rose. It's about understanding how that rose might fit into a whole system, where you might place it so that the thorns might actually, keep the annoying little boys next door from climbing over your fence without having to put up barbed wire. What you might want to grow next to it to help feed it, where it's going to be beneficial to other things, what kinds of yields you're going to get. Maybe you might plant a rose that is simpler than the big fluffy ones. It has fewer petals, but has more options for pollinators to actually get in there and get pollen from it, or produces rose hips that you can make tea out of. And so thinking about that and really valuing relationships, not just products, not just the work we do, not just the content we create, and the stuff we make, but the relationships we build. And I often think in our movements and stuff, we sometimes forget how important those relationships are. Then recognizing and working with patterns. In permaculture, we're looking at the patterns of how nature moves energy, like why a tree is shaped like a tree and why that's the same shape as a stream or a river or your veins. What a web does and why that's different from, a linear connection. My academic training was in psychotherapy. I'm also the adult child of 2 social workers. And my mother used to tell me stories about her clients instead of bedtime stories. And what I recognize now about my mother was she really thought in patterns. It used to amaze me how she could spend 5 minutes with someone and then she'd have them all sized up and she'd generally be right, even though it annoyed the hell out of me. She'd be like, oh, so-and-so is a borderline personality. You can't trust her. She thinks you're the greatest thing right now, but believe me, like next week, she's going to think you're the worst. She's splitting, right? And she'd generally be right, not because she was psychic, although she might have been, but because she knew the patterns and recognized the patterns. So in social permaculture, I think learning to see those patterns, but to do it in a way where we also keep open to change and surprise. So we're not just pigeonholing people, but we are, I don't know how many of you follow the news, but, there's a big trial right now with E. Jean Carroll, who's trying to hold Trump accountable for raping her back in the 90s. And part of what they're looking at is the pattern of behavior. Generally in a court case, you can't bring in other things the person's done as evidence. But in a sexual assault case, at least in a civil trial, you can show that there's a pattern of this behavior. And so now they're bringing in other women who are, reciting their stories that are so similar about his behavior, because there is a pattern of guys who feel that entitlement and take advantage of women tend to do it more than once. It's not just a one-time thing. There's care for the future, right? Share the surplus, reduce consumption. And then valuing diversity. It's another social permaculture principle. In nature, diversity creates resilience. If you have a forest of genetically identical engineered trees and you get a disease or you get a shift in the climate, the whole forest can die. But if you have a diversity both of species and of genetic diversity within a species, you might get a disease that some people are more susceptible to than others, actually, just as we've seen with COVID. So some people are going to survive, some trees are going to survive, some species are going to survive. If you have a bug that likes a certain plant and it has to munch its way through 100 other different species to get to the next one, it's going to have a harder time taking out a whole field than if you have a field of, hybrid corn that's all the same and you get a bug that likes that. And so with people too, we can think about valuing diversity instead of seeing our differences as something to be afraid of and something to divide us, to understand that our differences actually expand our perspective. They expand our intelligence, our way of knowing about the world, our understanding of history, our lenses through which we can view the world. And that will make our whole human system more intelligent and more resilient. And this is one I kind of coined myself. I think of it as feed what you want to grow. So instead of what we tend to do, which is destroy what you don't want, make war on it, attack it, right? What happens if you do that in the garden? Let's say you have a pest that you don't want, and your response is, okay, poison it, nuke it, get the right spray, kill it. What generally happens is you create resistance. You kill some of those bugs, but there's always some that'll survive, and those are the ones that are resistant to that poison, and they'll breed, and pretty soon you've got the superbug, right, that you can't kill. Instead, in permaculture, what we try to do is say, well, what is it we want, and how do we create the conditions that are going to favor what we want? So if if what we want are kids that eat healthy and love to be in the garden, how do we create experiences that they can have that are going to encourage them to grow food and interact with food and love healthy food? This young girl got excited with the idea of, could she drink from a calla lily? Right? So it's like, well, let's try it. Let's see what happens. Maybe we can. What a wonderful, magical thing to do, to be able to use a calla lily as your goblet. And those kinds of experiences feed that nature connection that we want people to have. And then thinking about creativity is an unlimited resource. So many of the resources in the world that we exploit them as if they were unlimited, when they actually are limited, like oil and gas, or water, or minerals from the earth. But creativity is not limited, and if we employ it, we can often come up with solutions or new ways of doing things that maybe nobody thought of before. And that's going to create more abundance and more joy and more wonderfulness in the world. And then ultimately, what we're trying to do is develop a culture of respect, of kindness, and of trust. And to me, that's sort of what we aim for with social permaculture. And coming out of COVID, I think it's especially important, again, when so much is online, and so much of online interaction is about grievance and anger and bitterness and blame, to really shift that and say, how do we consciously honor each other, show our respect for each other, treat each other with kindness, learn to deal with conflicts in ways that, because they're coming out of that respect, actually build trust rather than destroy trust. So those are a few of the permaculture principles. That we like to think about.
Those were great.
Yeah.
In my city, they're starting all these different construction projects to, make the roadways more accessible for people. But, people don't want to change. And we have a highway going through our downtown. It's 2 one-way streets. So they're changing it to 2 two-ways. And it just is interesting to see how the community responds and processes through these changes. Because emotions run high.
That they do. But there's been those fun moments, I think, with looking at the permaculture principles, saying, how do we have healthy relationships? But COVID kind of gave us this moment, like kind of a wedge in there where things that's shaken up, and we get to come back. We're in a new place. Like, how do we manage change? How do we engage with change? How do we create the type of world that we want. We've had this disturbance. Often in ecology, when you have disturbance, you have possibility. What's going to fill that? Could be what was there before, but it could be something new, right? So I think that's part of one of the blessings we have with COVID is that it allows us to step back a little bit and reassess. And I think these principles that Star just presented on are a really good foundation. So to think about, how do we want to do that?
Another thing we often talk about is the idea of norms and rules in groups. Rules are things that are kind of set, and generally you know what they are, and they're enforced in some way. Norms are things that often are unconscious or unspoken, but can actually be more powerful than rules. I mean, what happens if you go into an elevator with a bunch of people? Like 90% of the time, everybody turns around, faces the door, faces forward, and you don't talk to each other. There's no rule, right? There's nothing on the door that says you must face forward. Do not talk to each other. But that's kind of what everyone does because that's the norm. And if somebody, I have been in elevators where someone started talking and it's been very nice. But, if someone were to walk in, turn around, face the crowd and start singing a song or telling a joke, people would be a little uncomfortable. People might even be scared. You'd be like, what's wrong with this person? If they're going to break this norm, what else might they do? Could they have a gun in there? Are they? Yeah. So I think with COVID, what happened was all the norms got broken. And in some ways, that's an opportunity. In systems theory, there's always the idea that sometimes to change a system, you have to let the system collapse. So we want to do a little breakup now. If you think about COVID as an opportunity to shift some norms as we come out of it, like what are some of the norms in some of the groups that you've had? Do they, sometimes you can have norms that further inclusion. Like I always think about one festival I got invited to speak at a music festival and do a workshop. And so I was at this festival. Everyone there was probably 20 or 30 years younger than me. To my eyes, they all seemed incredibly good looking, extremely slim, and very underdressed, like nearly naked. I was enjoying it, right? But I was kind of feeling like, oh, well, people are probably going to look at me and see like a frumpy old lady. But actually, people would come up and they would sort of extend a hand and say, hi, my name is so-and-so, and you look interesting. What's your name? And it was a little different out here in the West Coast. People don't shake hands a lot. People either already know you and come up and hug you, or they kind of ignore you. Right? And it made it really easy to interact with people. It felt very, very inclusive. So we'd like to have a little breakout and have you do some thinking about what are some of the norms in your group. Are there norms that further inclusion, or are there norms that maybe exclude people? If the norm is that everybody goes out to the pub and has a drink, and that's where all the real business goes on, and somebody is in recovery from alcoholism and doesn't want to be in that situation, that's going to kind of exclude them from that group. So how long will they have for this, Charles?
We'll have 10 minutes. Do you think that's still a good amount of time, Star?
Maybe we could make it, we're a little over time. Yeah, let's make it 8. Yeah.
8 minutes. Okay. So you have 8 minutes to talk to each other. You'll be in a group of 3 to 4. Again, if you need interpretation, just don't accept the invite and stay in the main room. Or if you don't want to take part in the breakout room, you can just stay in the main room, keep your camera off, and take your moment. But we'll get back together in 8 minutes. So I invite you to join the breakout room, and here we go.
Think about what is
Welcome back, everybody.
So I'm curious, did anyone come up with norms that you feel have changed or that you would like to change?
One thing that I brought up was that where I live, at least, which is in a good blue area, we found that eye contact was really becoming a very important new norm when we had our masks on, and we were we had to learn to read people's eyes because we're not always looking at them in normal times. But when that was all we had to speak with it to each other with, other than the sound, it became surprisingly expressive and very satisfying to have that contact.
Oh, that's beautiful. I saw another hand there.
Oh, that was me. I raised my hand. But I was just thinking about the norm that emerged. I feel more permission to opt out of things now. I felt more pressure before, and then I feel like you can show up to less things that you feel like you need to show up to, and there's more of an understanding that people may or may not come to things.
Good one. George, is that your hand?
Yeah, I was thinking when we were in our small group, I've had to get used to having meetings in Zoom space. I really pushed right up till that COVID time of we need to meet in person. So much energy is generated when you meet in person. But I've seen the pluses. We've incorporated people that couldn't do in-person meetings. They're further away, they have a kid, they can't get away from the house, whatever. But I found that I can only do that if the point of the meeting is eventually to meet in person. I've tried writing and creativity groups where they're just online, and they didn't hold me in the end. It had to be, we're building toward a camp, we're building toward a ritual or something.
I know during COVID, there was one point where I was watching a recording of somebody's workshop on something. It was probably like some permaculture workshop. And at one point, the leader just said, okay, well, that's good. We're going to break for lunch now. And everyone got up and I burst into tears.
Aww.
I want to go to lunch. I want to hang out with, I want to have those conversations where they're not structured. They're not part of the program. They're just conversations. And, like this last weekend, we had a small permaculture gathering, and I realized how much I was getting out of that, the informality of the in-personness, the conversations you don't expect, you haven't programmed in, that just emerge. The serendipity. Cameron, see your hand.
Me, Jeff. So one of the things that I brought up was it seems to me that social media exploded, and I'm not able to pick apart whether it had more to do with COVID or politics. But along with that, social media was an incredible erosion in accountability for what we say.
Yeah.
And this is for me, who was a business ethics exec, this is difficult for me to swallow. And so it's been a tough journey.
Yeah. It's really so true. It's like the norms of how we talk to each other on social media or how we critique each other are so harsh compared to the norms we might have had in person.
Well, and the other thing is that, and without going down a politics conversation, the part that really gripped my heart is how many people that I was involved with that lost their jobs for behaving in ways far less than what we're seeing from our public officials. And so this is really messing with me. So the norms are changing in that way. I think, I don't know. I'm just an observer at this point.
Thank you. Marianne.
Hi. One of the things that really hit me, like right near the end of the little breakout group, was when the people was sharing about the need to meet in person, and it really touched my heart. And then, Star, when you were talking about just now, seeing the people getting up to go to lunch and wanting to cry, it made me remember something that I haven't thought of since early on in the pandemic. I was watching on Netflix stand-up comedian from the before times. Everything was the before times at that point because it was so early in the pandemic, and I was watching. It was very funny. And at the end, when the credits were rolling, what they showed just as a backdrop of, for the credits to roll, was the audience getting up. And it was out at BAM that he had done, Brooklyn Academy of Music, where he had done it, which is in, I'm in New York, so that's where I live. And I like the comedian very much, but I found myself watching the people getting up and putting their coats on and walking out, waiting to get out. You get stuck in the line waiting to get out of the theater, and it's a bit annoying at that time. I was watching it so hungrily. I wanted to be in that crowd of people. I couldn't believe the feeling that I had. And I have a very high tolerance for being at home by myself. So it was a very strange experience. Wow, I haven't thought about that in ages. So despite all these good normals that I have now of being able to be myself at home and work from home and have the foster cats and like all the things that I can do now and how much my life has changed, whether I like it or not, I need to be with people. I need to be squished up in that crowd, I don't know.
Yeah. There's a video on YouTube. It's like Sharon Shannon and Mundy leading the whole city of Galway and singing Galway Girl. And it's like a amazing street crowd with thousands of people, and people are doing all kinds of, they're belly dancing to it. And I can't tell you how many times I've watched that over COVID, right? Just like, oh, I want to be in that crowd of people. I saw Ani had a hand up, and then Wendy.
Yes, I don't feel that way personally when I see crowds, but sometimes I do. I mean, there's a nostalgia. It's funny because I just feel like so much is it that we're just catapulted into this Aquarian age where we long for that community, but we have to be outside to watch it, almost that observer effect of, and to me, that's the huge shift of it's good though, because now I can say, okay, well, if it's 4 or 5 people, 10 maybe, so last night I worked at elections and it was 10 people, and sometimes if the voice would say put on mask, I did, and because there's still remnants, and that was actually what we discussed in our first group, was that ways to check for any kind of COVID stuff because the news doesn't tell you anymore. So But yeah, it's a new normal.
Any?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Star, I was just going to say that I'm always drooling over those spontaneous street dances. There's a word for them because sometimes they're organized, but they look like they're not organized. They remind me of the sacred drama that Witch Camp was always so poignant for me about. And because it just seems like magic that, oh, these people who were just walking through the train station, they're suddenly dancing together. Oh, look what that couple's doing. Look what they're doing. So I found myself during the pandemic drooling over those lovely videos of different spontaneous street dances. But my question is for Cameron, because I wonder if you would elaborate on what you said, because it's like my mind is reverberating a little bit. I think I heard you saying that as an ethics business person, you're like stammering over how raunchy people have gotten into high power in this country. Is that kind of what you were saying? I kind of needed to hear more from you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, actually, Jeff.
Yeah, it
Jeff said
was me, Jeff. My heart aches over how we held people accountable in the business place, and people lost their jobs for not behaving respectfully toward others, and now it feels to me almost like, what was that for? So yeah, I'm struggling with that. I'm struggling with what I read and what I see, and the behaviors that are going unchecked.
Right.
Dusty.
Yeah, thanks.
You were unmuted and then you muted yourself.
I just got in. Woohoo! That's probably why I was muted. I'm so happy to be here. And I really love to be all alone. All alone. Me and just the trees. But it's been so out of balance. Okay. but and so I don't really know what the topic is we're discussing, but anyway, one of the benefits is that I really have, it's mostly been me and the trees here and all the other elemental beings. And I've really deepened my connection and my communications. I mean, hearing from them. So, and I'm so happy to be finally in that, because it was like an hour I've been trying to get in. And I sent a thing saying, I'm so sad, Now I'm so happy again. So thank you. Love y'all.
Thank you. Yeah, there seems to be something strange going on. People did have trouble getting on. The link I originally sent to everybody in the world turned out to be wrong. It was one of those days, but it is being recorded and will be up there, so you can go back and see what you missed if you want to.
I've found Zoom client to be extremely problematic. And the last time I tried to do something on it, all the tech support people were saying, oh, no, it's not because you have your cookies all set for privacy. But then in the last hour of the whole weekend, I thought, I'm going to give up my privacy. And I got in. So it wasn't that this time, though, because I tried that. But anyway, just wanted to be helpful and share that.
Thank you.
Maybe don't use Zoom client. I mean.
So we want to just say a few words at the end about how do we change a norm. Just thinking about, some of the dysfunctional norms we might have experienced in groups, the gossip and backbiting, the spreading rumors, and the internet really exacerbates a lot of these. The people who leave instead of confronting, some people will hoard information and power. Stomping out, that used to be my favorite in my younger days. Preferably with throwing something as well, right? Uh, dramatizing everything is like, the big drama, spiraling down that vortex of victimhood, attacking the leader, getting into online arguments all the time. And of course, in a lot of our groups and our nonprofits and everything, that overwork and burnout. But it's the idea that we can actually create norms and structures that meet our needs and that favor the behaviors that we want. So things like direct, respectful confrontation, accountability, like Jeff was saying, that we often have that on lower levels and not on higher levels. And it's an important, I think it's important that we have things like the trials going on now for Trump, because without that, we have no accountability, and that filters down. Learning how to do constructive critique, giving people energetic support, cheering them on when they're doing something, working towards clear communication, learning how to do active listening, where you're listening for the tone and the feeling and not just the content. Nonviolent communication, that can be a very helpful sort of tool for developing clear communication. It's also sometimes people resist it, don't like it. It can be misused and it can be badly applied, but it can be a very helpful tool. Getting mediation when you need it. Mentoring each other, really consciously helping to develop skills in other people. Practicing self-care that we need, and having fun, right? Not everything has to be deadly serious, even when, I've been in lots of direct actions and in situations that were sometimes even really literally life or death, in places like Palestine. And one thing that really struck me about the Palestinians is they really knew how to have fun in life. And I think that was what kept them going through all kinds of really, really hard and tragic circumstances, is that, I always said it's like the tanks would roll in, and as soon as the tanks rolled out, the coffee pot would come out, and people would be sitting around and talking and eating, and then the tanks would roll back in again, the coffee pot would go out. Right? So how do we change those norms? I think there's 3 steps. We have to first name it. If the norm we want to change is that people gossip and don't confront each other, we have to actually say, hey, this is what I see happening in our community. And then we have to choose something different. We have to say, okay, well, do we really want to change this? If we want to change this, we have to make a conscious choice to say we want to try in this community not to just gossip and backbite, but to encourage each other to actually deal directly with each other, to say, oh, okay, pondweed, you're really furious at Mudflat. How can I support you to talk to them directly? Maybe you need to vent to me about it first, but how can I help you find a way to actually bring this up? And then you need to practice, because norms and habits don't change in an instant. And sometimes it takes multiple times of practicing it before it becomes the new norm, before it becomes the default. So that's just some ideas about maybe how we can use this time to consciously shift some of the norms. Now that we're out of those habits, maybe it's a good time where we can consciously choose some new habits. Well, I think we're at about the end of our time for tonight. Charles, do you have something you want to say in closing?
Find my button here. I think what I'd like to just recap on what's been said is this idea that we're at this opening, and the permaculture principle, especially the one feed what you want to grow, I carry heavily into this new time in like reforming what our relationships look like and coming into them intentionally. I've just seen a lot of, and part of why I think Star and I came to this is what we're going to do, is that we've seen a lot of bumpiness as people kind of get back into space and to do it with a little of tolerance for people relearning how to interact and kind of sharpen those skills again of working. So I think there's a piece of patience, but also really naming what we want and working for it, and not just recreating the thing we had before because that's what was there. I think we can create a new way of being. And I'm really excited about that. So we can feed what we want to grow and be patient with each other as that growing takes time.
I want to mention a few other things that we're doing. Tomorrow I am doing another in my magical activism, my ritual skills series. And tomorrow night it's focusing on rituals to make things happen. And if you're interested in that, you can sign up for the whole series by donation and get the recordings of the other ones that I've done, and it's at starhawk.org. We also are going to start doing a social permaculture clinic where you can kind of just come in. It's going to be on Sundays at 10 a.m. And you can send us in your social permaculture questions or dilemmas. It's kind of like the Dear Abby of social permaculture. And then we'll do some brainstorming and use them as case studies to talk about different social permaculture approaches. Each one will have a theme, but you're not limited to the theme if you've got something going on. So maybe Charles can put in the chat the connection to that, the link to that.
Yeah, we have the web page and registration page in the chat, and the general themes, though we're not going to, if there's other themes that come up, we'll follow those too.
Yeah.
I'm also going to chat, put a couple more classes.
Yeah.
So there's a sacred water in-person class coming up if you're interested in looking at water and restoration. Sorry, you might want to speak about that. Is your part?
Yeah, that one's going to be in person up at my ranch in the Cazadero Hills in the Bay Area, together with Eric Olson, who's an amazing permaculture designer and practitioner and teacher. And we're going to be looking at both the spiritual but also the very practical aspects of dealing with water, stream restoration, building structures like beaver dam analogs and brush dams and some rock dams. And I'll give you a tour of my water storage systems, thousands of gallons of tanks and pipes and everything. And we'll be able to do some ritual around water and really appreciating water and flow. We've been blessed with a lot of water this year, and it's really an incredible gift. And it'll be a fun time. It's camping out, though there's a few options for some indoor sleeping space, and very informal up at my place. Tell us about permaculture gadgets.
I'm going to do a short little course. It's going to be just making permaculture gadgets. So going to teach anybody who wants to learn how to make a rain barrel or a water filter, a tabletop water filter, worm bin, devices for heating and cooling your home as we head into summer, and a compost tree brewer. I'm just going to take time and just go over how do you make these things that we often talk about in permaculture, and different than a YouTube video. It'll be live, so you can ask questions like, how does that actually work? Or I'm trying to do it and it's not fitting. So yeah, come join us live. How do you build some of the things we talked about?
And if you want to take a permaculture design course, we have one coming up in British Columbia on Vancouver Island at a wonderful place called OUR Eco Village, June 30th through July 14th. And you can find out that information on earthactivisttraining.org or ourecovillage.org. And that's an incredible example of some amazing natural building and permaculture systems. And it's always a lot of fun, really a wonderful space to be in. So I hope to see you at some of these things.
Charles, how are you doing the gadget one?
It's a virtual. It'll be online.
Okay, I didn't see a link.
I put the link in there, but I'll put the link again.
Mm-hmm.
I think the chat is working intermittently tonight. It's not doing the full stream.
Well, we will. I'll figure out how to get the chat to you all.
Every time you go into a room, it stops the chat and you have to restart it. So
yeah, the string stuff.
Can I mention the peacemaker that precedes the thing?
Yeah.
Our Eco Village is hosting an incredible experience called Peacemaker Gathering, and it's with Indigenous elders and activists and incredible people from all over the world. Will be on site for 4 days preceding the permaculture class. So I can send the link to Charles. Charles, when you send out this stuff, can you add the link to this thing so people can take a look at it and see if they're interested in coming up to the permaculture class early?
Yeah, I put the Eco Village link in the chat right now, but yeah, you can, if there's a specific one, you can send it to me. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, there's for the permaculture, for the and then after that, or as part of the permaculture class, there'll be an opportunity to walk with Indigenous elders on a sacred walk, and for one of the days of that permaculture class in the beginning. And it's a rare and special opportunity. It's probably the last for this Indigenous group because the elders have all aged. So some of us did it last year, and it's a very memorable experience.
All right. Well, let us say thank you to Earth and Air and Fire and Water, and thank you to Spirit. Thank you to Charles and to our whole Earth Activist team. Thank you to our wonderful interpreters, Sarah and Moonbeam, and to all of you for joining us. And our circle is open now, but unbroken. Merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. And Charles, you have some music to play us out with.
I do.